At 42 years old, she had never felt a man's touch, until a mysterious stranger appeared in the library with a proposal that would change her life forever. 1 year of a fake marriage in exchange for a fortune. But what he didn't tell her was that some contracts are impossible to break. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Sarah Mitchell was cataloguing rare first editions when the postman knocked, his face unusually serious as he handed her the cream-colored envelope with no return address. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the wax seal, finding inside an invitation that made no sense at all. Someone wanted to meet her, someone who knew things about her life that strangers shouldn't know. She set the letter down on the oak desk that had belonged to her grandmother, then her mother, and now her. 42 years old, and she'd never received a letter quite like this one. The Mitchell Memorial Library had been her world for as long as she could remember, its dusty corners and towering shelves more familiar than any lover's embrace. Not that she'd ever had one of those. The appointment was set for Friday at 3 o'clock. The address led to the fanciest hotel in their small coastal town, a place where she'd never even stepped foot inside. Sarah read the letter 3 more times, her heart beating faster with each word. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew about her mother's medical bills. Someone knew about the library's financial troubles that kept her awake at night, staring at unpaid invoices and dwindling account balances. But who could possibly care about a small-town librarian who'd never traveled further than the state capital? Friday came faster than she wanted. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror trying to decide what a person wore to a mysterious meeting with a stranger. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of cardigan sweaters and sensible shoes. Nothing that seemed appropriate for whatever this was supposed to be. She settled on her best navy dress and pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's, hoping she looked respectable enough for whatever was coming. The hotel lobby was everything she'd imagined it would be. Marble floors that clicked under her, modest heels, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her annual salary, and staff who moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that came from serving people with serious money. Sarah approached the front desk with sweaty palms, her voice barely above a whisper when she mentioned the appointment. "Mr. Davidson is waiting for you in the penthouse suite," the desk clerk said smoothly, as if mysterious meetings with strangers happened every day. "The private elevator is just around that corner." The ride to the top floor felt endless. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the polished metal doors, and she wondered what she was doing here. What could someone possibly want from her? The elevator dinged softly and opened to reveal a hallway with only one door. Before she could knock, it opened. The man standing there was nothing like what she'd expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected at all. Tall and dark-haired with eyes the color of storm clouds, he wore an expensive suit like it was armor. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his perfectly styled hair to his Italian leather shoes. He was probably in his early 40s, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without saying a word. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Thank you for coming. I'm James Davidson." She'd never heard the name before, but something about the way he said it suggested she should have. He stepped aside to let her enter, and Sarah found herself in a suite that was bigger than her entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the ocean that took her breath away, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine about how rich people lived. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here." That was an understatement. Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "I can't imagine what you'd want with me, Mr. Davidson. I'm just a librarian." Something flickered in his eyes, too quick for her to identify. "You're more than that. You've kept the Mitchell Memorial Library running for 15 years, despite financial challenges that would have closed most institutions. You've cared for your mother through her illness, while maintaining your professional responsibilities. You're respected in your community and trusted by everyone who knows you." Heat crept up her neck. How did this stranger know so much about her life? "I don't understand. Have you been investigating me?" "I have." He said it without apology, settling into the chair across from her with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being in control. I needed to be certain you were the right person for what I'm about to propose. Sarah's mouth went dry. Propose? James Davidson leaned forward slightly, his storm gray eyes never leaving her face. I need a wife, Miss Mitchell. And I'm prepared to pay you $2 million to marry me. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways, her grip tightening on her purse until her knuckles went white. I'm sorry, what? $2 million for 1 year of marriage. A business arrangement, nothing more. His voice remained perfectly steady, as if he were discussing the weather instead of turning her entire life upside down. The contract would be clear about expectations. No physical intimacy required. Separate bedrooms, separate lives within. The same household. After 12 months, we divorce quietly, and you return to your life with enough money to solve every financial problem you've ever had. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline or the hidden cameras or something that would make this insane conversation make sense. When nothing happened, she found her voice. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk into someone's life and propose marriage to a complete stranger. I can, and I am. He stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I won't lie to you about my motivations. I need a wife to satisfy certain legal requirements related to my family's business holdings. It needs to be someone with no romantic entanglements, no hidden agendas, and no interest in extending the arrangement beyond the agreed time frame. So you picked me because I'm pathetic enough to agree. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. He turned around, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, his expression softened slightly. I picked you because you're genuine, because you've dedicated your life to something meaningful, instead of chasing money or status. Because everyone I spoke to in your town had nothing but respect for your character and integrity. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. This is insane. I should leave. Your mother needs specialized treatment. That your insurance won't cover, he said quietly, stopping her before she reached the door. The library needs extensive repairs and updated technology to remain viable. Your mortgage is 3 months behind, and you've been taking out personal loans to cover operational expenses. Each word hit like a physical blow. Sarah turned around slowly, her face burning with embarrassment and anger. How dare you? I dare because I'm offering you a solution. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick folder. Everything is here. The medical specialists who could help your mother, the contractors who could modernize the library, the financial arrangements that would eliminate every debt you're carrying. She wanted to walk out. Every instinct told her to leave immediately and pretend this conversation had never happened. But the folder in his hands represented everything she'd been praying for during those sleepless nights when the bills piled up and her mother's condition worsened. Why? Me specifically, she whispered. Because you're not looking for a fairy tale. You understand that sometimes practical solutions are the only ones that work. He set the folder on the coffee table between them. I'm not offering you romance, Miss Mitchell. I'm offering you a business partnership that happens to involve a marriage certificate. Sarah looked at the folder, then back at his face. There was something there behind the controlled expression and careful words, something that looked almost like loneliness, though she couldn't imagine why a man with his obvious wealth and power would feel lonely. What exactly would you expect from me? Attendance at necessary social functions, residence in my home during the contract period, discretion about the true nature of our arrangement. He paused, and the appearance of a stable, committed relationship when required for legal purposes. Appearance. Nothing. More than that. Sarah sank back into the chair, her mind spinning. $2 million. It was more money than she'd see in 5 lifetimes of running the library. It would save her mother. It would save the library. It would save everything she'd spent her adult life trying to protect. I need time to think. Of course. He walked to a desk in the corner and wrote something on a piece of hotel stationery. My private number. You can reach me any time in the next 48 hours. She took the paper with fingers that weren't quite steady. "And if I say no? Then you walk out of here and we never see each other again." His expression remained neutral, but something in his voice suggested the outcome mattered more than he was letting on. Sarah stood up again, the folder still sitting on the table like a promise or a threat. "This is crazy." "Yes," he agreed, "but sometimes crazy solutions are the only ones that work." She made it to the door before turning back one more time. "Why a year? Why not 6 months or 2 years?" For the first time since she'd met him, James Davidson hesitated. "Legal requirements," he said finally, but something in his tone suggested there was more to it than that. The elevator ride down felt like falling. Sarah stared at her reflection. In the polished doors, the piece of paper with his phone number crumpled in her hand. $2 million, a year of her life, a marriage that wasn't really a marriage to a man who was essentially a stranger. She drove home through the familiar streets of her small town, past the diner where she ate lunch every Tuesday, past the post office where everyone knew her name, past the houses where she'd grown up knowing every neighbor. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. The possibility of a different life hung in the air like the salt smell from the ocean. Her mother was sleeping when Sarah got home, her breathing shallow but steady. The medical equipment crowded their small living room, a constant reminder of how much everything had changed since the diagnosis. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and watched her mother's peaceful face, thinking about experimental treatments and specialist doctors and all the things that money could buy. The library was quiet when she returned to work on Monday morning. She went through the motions of her daily routine, but her mind kept drifting to storm grey eyes and impossible propositions. The folder sat locked in her desk drawer, its contents both terrifying and tempting. By Tuesday, she'd read through every document 3 times, medical reports about treatments that could extend her mother's life, architectural plans that would transform the library into something magnificent, financial projections that would secure both institutions for decades to come, and a marriage contract that spelled out in precise legal language exactly what James Davidson expected from their arrangement. Wednesday brought another letter, this one from the bank about her overdue mortgage payments. Sarah stared at the final notice and felt something break inside her chest. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She called the number Thursday evening after her mother had fallen asleep and the library was closed and the whole town had settled into its quiet rhythm. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting. "Miss Mitchell." "I'll do it," she said before she could change her mind. "I'll marry you." There was silence on the other end of the line, so long that she wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally he spoke, and his voice was different somehow, less controlled than before. "Are you certain?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm going to do it anyway. We should meet tomorrow to finalize the arrangements." "All right." Another pause. "Sarah." The sound of her first name in his voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Yes?" "You won't regret this." She hoped he was right, but as she hung up the phone and stared out at the dark ocean beyond her window, Sarah Mitchell wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, for the first time in 42 years, she was finally about to start living. The wedding was nothing like Sarah had ever imagined her wedding would be, back when she was young enough to believe in fairy tales. A cold Tuesday morning at the courthouse, with James's lawyer as one witness and a secretary she'd never met as the other. She wore her best dress, the same navy one from their first meeting, and carried no flowers. James looked impeccable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but his hands were steady when he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said with practiced ceremony. James leaned forward and pressed his lips briefly to her cheek, a gesture so formal it felt like a handshake. Sarah's skin tingled where he'd touched her, which was ridiculous. This was a business arrangement. Nothing more. The drive to his estate took 3 hours, 3 hours of sitting in the passenger seat of his black Mercedes, while classical music played softly, and neither of them spoke. Sarah watched the landscape change from her familiar coastal down to rolling hills to the manicured perfection of one of the state's most exclusive neighborhoods. Each mile took her further from everything she'd ever known. The house was not what she'd expected. When James had said mansion, she'd pictured something old and imposing, maybe with Gothic architecture and intimidating stone walls. Instead, the Davidson estate was all clean lines and massive windows, modern and elegant in a way that made her feel small and out of place. The circular driveway could have held a dozen cars, and the front door was made of dark wood that gleamed like it had been polished that morning. "Mrs. Davidson," said the woman who opened the door before James could reach for his keys. She was perhaps 50, with silver hair, pulled back in a perfect bun and clothes that screamed expensive, understated elegance. "Welcome home." Home. The word felt foreign in Sarah's mouth. This wasn't home. Home was her tiny house with its creaky floors and view of the harbor. This was something else entirely. "Sarah, this is Elena Rodriguez, my housekeeper," James said, setting down their minimal luggage. "Elena, this is my wife." The word wife sounded strange coming from his mouth, like he was testing how it felt. Elena smiled warmly and extended her hand, but Sarah caught something in the woman's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity about why a man like James Davidson had married someone like her. "I've prepared the blue suite for you, Mrs. Davidson," Eleanor said. "It has a lovely view of the gardens." "The blue suite?" Sarah looked at James, confused. "Your rooms," he explained without meeting her eyes. "We discussed separate accommodations." Of course they had. This was a contract marriage, not a real one. She'd known that from the beginning. So why did walking up the curved staircase to her separate bedroom feel like some kind of rejection? The blue suite was larger than her entire house back home, a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that looked like something from a magazine. The bedroom had a king-sized bed with crisp white linens and more pillows than one person could possibly need. The bathroom was marble and chrome, with a shower that could fit 4 people and a bathtub deep enough to swim in. Sarah sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried not to cry. Everything was beautiful and perfect and completely foreign. She was a small-town librarian pretending to be the wife of a millionaire, and she had no idea what she was supposed to do next. A soft knock interrupted her moment of panic. "Come in." It was Eleanor, carrying a silver tray with tea and small sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. "I thought you might be hungry after the drive." "Thank you." Sarah's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Eleanor, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mrs. Davidson. Has James ever been married before?" Elena set the tray down on the coffee table and paused, choosing her words carefully. "No, Mom. There have been relationships, of course, but nothing serious. Mr. Davidson is very focused on his business interests." What kind of business? Sarah realized she'd agreed to marry a man she knew almost nothing about. Real estate development, primarily. Hotels, commercial properties. The Davidson Group has holdings across the country. Elena straightened a pillow that didn't need straightening. "If you don't mind me saying so, Mrs. Davidson, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more." Elena gestured vaguely, then seemed to think better of whatever she'd been about to say. "Different." After Elena left, Sarah unpacked her few belongings in the enormous walk-in closet that could have housed a small family. Her simple clothes looked pathetic, hanging in a space designed for designer gowns and expensive shoes. She'd brought 3 cardigan sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, her work clothes, and 1 dress suitable for church. It was everything she owned, and it took up less space than James probably used for his ties. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20 people. James sat at one end of the polished mahogany table, Sarah at the other, with enough empty space between them for a small army. The food was delicious, but conversation was stilted and formal. He asked about her mother's health. She asked about his work. Neither of them mentioned the absurdity of their situation. "I've arranged for a car and driver to be available whenever you need to visit your mother or handle library business," he said, as Elena served dessert. "The account information for your personal expenses is in the folder on your desk." Personal expenses, as if she were an employee receiving a benefits package instead of his wife. "Thank you." There's a gym on the 3rd floor if you're interested. In using it. The library is on the 2nd floor, east wing. Pool house, tennis court, walking trails through the woods. He recited amenities like he was giving a hotel tour. Make yourself at home. But how was she supposed to make herself at home in a place that felt like a museum? How was she supposed to act like a wife to a man who treated her like a polite stranger? The first week passed in a blur of awkward routines. James left early for his office in the city and returned late, usually after she'd already eaten dinner, alone, and retreated to her suite. They were like polite roommates who happened to share an address and a last name. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him through the windows, taking calls by the pool or working late in his home office, but they rarely spoke beyond basic pleasantries. Sarah tried to establish her own routine. She video called with her mother every morning, managed library business remotely, and spent long hours exploring the grounds of her temporary home. The gardens were beautiful, maintained by a team of landscapers who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The library James had mentioned turned out to be a book lover's paradise with first editions and rare volumes that made her librarian's heart race. But it was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely in a way she'd never experienced before. She'd been alone in her small town, yes, but she'd been surrounded by people who knew her. Here she was invisible. Everything changed the night of the storm. It started as a typical evening. Sarah was reading in her sitting room when the wind picked up, rattling the massive windows and sending tree branches scraping against the glass. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. She felt her way downstairs, looking for Elena or James or anyone who might know where the flashlights were kept. The house was eerily quiet except for the howling wind and the sound of rain lashing against the windows. "Sarah?" James's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. "I'm here," she called back. "By the staircase." A beam of light swept across the foyer, and she saw him approaching with a flashlight and what looked like camping lanterns. He'd changed from his usual business attire into jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. "Power's out across the whole county," he said. "Could be hours before it's restored. What should we do?" "Eleanor's visiting her sister overnight, so it's just us." He handed her a flashlight. "There's a generator that powers the essential systems, but the main electrical won't be back until the storm passes." They ended up in the living room, the one with the massive stone fireplace that Sarah had admired but never seen used. James built a fire with practiced efficiency, the warm light dancing across the walls and making the formal space feel suddenly intimate. They sat on the leather sofa, a respectable distance apart, watching the flames and listening to the storm. "Tourist outside. Are you afraid of storms?" he asked after a particularly loud crack of thunder. "No, I love them actually. There's something about the power of nature that's humbling." She tucked her feet under her, surprised by how natural this felt. "What about you?" "I used to be terrified as a child. Would hide in my closet until they passed." He stared into the fire, his expression distant. "My father thought it was weakness." There was something in his voice, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. "Lots of children are afraid of storms. Not Davidson children, according to him. We were supposed to be above such things." James reached for the poker and adjusted a log, sending sparks up the chimney. He had very specific ideas about strength and weakness. "He sounds difficult." He was many things. Difficult was the least of them. James turned to look at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "What about your father?" "He died when I was 12. Heart attack." Sarah wrapped her arms around her knees. "It was just me and my mother after that. She worked 3 jobs to keep the library running and put me through college." "That explains a lot." "What do you mean?" "Your dedication to taking care of people, it's not just duty for you, is it? It's love." The observation caught her off guard. In the firelight, with the storm raging outside and the usual barriers, between them temporarily lowered, James looked different. Less like the controlled businessman who'd proposed this arrangement, and more like a man carrying his own burdens. "I've never thought of it that way," she said softly. "I envy that. The ability to love so freely." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't think I've ever loved anyone the way you love your mother, or the way you love that library." That's sad. It's practical. Love makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability is dangerous. In my world. What world is that exactly? You've never really told me what you do. James was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. My family builds things. Hotels, shopping centers, residential developments. We buy land, we construct buildings, we sell them for profit. It's not particularly complicated. But it requires a certain ruthlessness. You can't worry about displacing families or destroying historical buildings or changing the character of communities. You have to focus on the bottom line. Sarah studied his profile in the firelight. Do you like it? Another long pause. It's what I was born to. That's not the same thing as liking it. He turned to look at her again, and something passed between them in the warm, flickering light. An understanding, maybe, or recognition of shared loneliness. No, he said finally. It's not the same thing at all. They talked until the fire died down to embers and the storm moved out to sea. About books, which surprised her with his knowledge of literature. About places they'd traveled, though her list was embarrassingly short compared to his. About dreams they'd had as children, before life and responsibility and other people's expectations had narrowed their choices. When the lights finally came back on, the sudden brightness felt harsh and intrusive. The spell was broken. James was back to being her contract husband, and Sarah was back to being the stranger he'd married for business reasons. I should let you get some rest, he said, standing and straightening his sweater. Yes, it's late. But she didn't want him to leave. For the first time since arriving at the estate, she'd felt like she belonged somewhere. Sarah, he paused at the doorway. Thank you for tonight. It's been a long time since I've had a conversation like that. After he left, Sarah sat in the bright living room and stared at the dying embers. Something had shifted during those hours in the darkness, something that had nothing to do with their contract or their arrangement. She'd seen glimpses of the man behind the businessman's facade, and what she'd seen had been achingly lonely and surprisingly gentle. But in the morning, James was gone before she woke up, and Elena mentioned he'd be traveling for business for the rest of the week. The brief intimacy of their storm-bound evening felt like something she might have imagined. It wasn't until she found the book on her nightstand that she knew it had been real. A first-edition copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, with a small note tucked inside the cover. I thought you might enjoy this, Jay. She held the book against her chest and wondered what she was doing. This was supposed to be simple, a year of her life in exchange for enough money to solve all her problems. But lying in the massive bed in her beautiful blue suite, Sarah Mitchell Davidson realized that nothing about this arrangement was going to be simple at all. Because somewhere between the wedding ceremony that wasn't really a wedding and the storm that had stripped away their pretenses, she'd started to care about the man she'd married. And that was the most dangerous complication of all. 3 months into their marriage, Sarah's mother collapsed in the hospital corridor while visiting her cardiologist. The call came at 2 in the morning, piercing through Sarah's sleep like a knife. She was dressed and in her car within minutes, her hands shaking as she drove through the empty streets back to her hometown. Her mother was stable, but weak, the doctors said. The experimental treatment had been helping, but her heart was more damaged than they'd initially thought. She needed constant monitoring now, maybe surgery that the insurance wouldn't cover, definitely care that the small regional hospital couldn't provide. Sarah sat in the sterile waiting room and cried for the first time since her wedding day. Not pretty tears, but the ugly, desperate kind that came from watching everything you loved slip away. She was alone again, just like she'd always been, making impossible decisions with no one to help carry the weight. Sarah. She looked up through her tears to see James walking down the corridor, still wearing his business suit, even though it was nearly dawn. His hair was disheveled, his usually perfect appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd driven straight from wherever he'd been. How did you know I was here? Elena told me you'd left in the middle of the night. I called the hospital. He sat down in the plastic chair beside her, his presence both unexpected and oddly comforting. "How is she?" "Dying." The word came out flat and final. "Maybe not. Today, maybe not this month, but dying." James was quiet for a long moment, watching the nurses move efficiently through their early morning routines. "What do the doctors recommend?" "Surgery she can't afford at a hospital 2 hours away, followed by months of rehabilitation at a facility that costs more per day than most people make in a week." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It doesn't matter what they recommend if we can't pay for it." "Yes, it does matter. It does." James pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "Dr. Martinez at Presbyterian handles cases like this. I'll call him now." "James, no, that's not part of our agreement." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Our agreement says I provide for you during our marriage. That includes your family's medical care. That's not what you meant when you wrote the contract." "Then maybe I should have been more specific." He was already dialing. "Dr. Martinez, it's James Davidson. I need a favor." Sarah listened in stunned silence as he arranged for her mother to be transferred to one of the best cardiac facilities in the state within hours. Private room, specialist care, everything covered. When he hung up, she stared at him in confusion. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you need help, and I can provide it." "But why do you care?" The question came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. James was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "I don't know," he said finally, "but I do." The ambulance transfer took most of the day. Sarah rode with her mother while James followed in his car, making phone calls to arrange details she couldn't have managed alone. By evening, her mother was settled in a private room with a view of the city, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped reassuringly and attended by nurses who actually seemed to care about their patients. "This is too much," Sarah's mother whispered when she was finally awake enough to understand what had happened. "That man barely knows us." "I know, Mom. I don't understand it either. He looks at you differently than you think." "What do you mean?" But her mother had drifted back to sleep, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her growing confusion about the man she'd married for money who kept acting like he actually cared. James appeared in the doorway with coffee and sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Dr. Martinez is optimistic. I can't repay you for this. I'm not asking you to." He handed her the coffee and sat in the visitor's chair. "When's the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." "Eat." She took a bite of the sandwich, surprised by how hungry she actually was. "James, I need to ask you something." "All right." "That first night during the storm, you said you envied my ability to love freely. But this, what you're doing for my mother, this is love. Maybe not romantic love, but care and compassion and generosity. So why do you think you can't love?" He was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because everyone I've ever cared about has left. My mother died when I was 8. My father remarried a woman who saw me as an inconvenience. My stepmother had her own children, and I became invisible in my own house." He stared out the hospital window at the city lights. "I learned early that caring about people just makes it hurt more when they disappoint you. So you stopped caring." "I tried to. But you can't, can you? That's why you chose me. Not because I was safe and uninteresting, but because somehow you knew I wouldn't leave." James turned to look at her, and in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital room, she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. "Sarah." "Mrs. Davidson." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman downstairs asking to see you. Says she's from your husband's office." Sarah looked at James in confusion. "Were you expecting someone?" "No." His expression had gone cold and professional again, the vulnerable moment broken. "I'll handle this." But before he could stand, the woman herself appeared behind the nurse. She was tall and elegant, probably in her 30s, with perfect blonde hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Everything about her screamed money and sophistication, and the kind of beauty that opened doors. "James, darling, there you are." The woman swept into the room as if she owned it, barely glancing at Sarah. "When Elena said you'd rushed off to some hospital emergency, I was so worried." "Victoria," James's voice was carefully neutral, "this is unexpected." "Is it? I've been calling for weeks, but you never return my messages." Victoria finally looked at Sarah with the kind of dismissive glance she might give a piece of unremarkable furniture. "And you must be the wife." The way she said wife made it sound like employee or temporary inconvenience. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "Sarah Davidson." "Victoria Ashford." The woman's smile was sharp as glass. "James and I have such a long history together, business and personal. I'm sure he's mentioned me." He hadn't, of course. Sarah looked at James, whose jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. "Victoria, this isn't the time or place." "Oh, but it's perfect timing, actually." Victoria opened her expensive purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "I brought those documents you've been waiting for. The Henderson project approvals came through. We should celebrate." The envelope sat between them like a challenge. Sarah could feel the tension in the room, the undercurrents of a relationship and conversation she wasn't privy to. This was James's real world, the one where beautiful, sophisticated women showed up unexpectedly and had claims on his time and attention. "I should go," Sarah said quietly, standing up. "Let you two discuss business." "Sarah." "Wait," James started. But she was already walking toward the door, her face burning with embarrassment and something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy, which was ridiculous. This was a contract marriage. She had no right to feel possessive about a man who was essentially paying her to pretend to be his wife. She made it to the hospital parking garage before the tears started again. Not the desperate tears from earlier, but angry, frustrated tears that she wiped away furiously. She was being stupid. This arrangement was temporary, beneficial, nothing more. James Davidson could have lunch with a dozen beautiful women, and it wouldn't matter to her, except it did matter. Somewhere between the storm-lit conversations and his unexpected kindness to her mother, Sarah had started to forget this was all pretend. She'd started to imagine that the gentle man who brought her first edition poetry books might actually care about the small-town librarian he'd married for convenience. Sarah. James's voice echoed through the concrete garage. She turned to find him walking toward her, his expression frustrated and something else she couldn't identify. "Victoria is a business associate, nothing more. You don't owe me any explanations." "Yes, I do." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "She's been pursuing a personal relationship for months. I've made it clear I'm not interested." "Because you're married to me." "No," he stepped closer, "because I don't want her." The words hung between them, loaded with implications that Sarah didn't dare examine too closely. "James, your mother's surgery is tomorrow. You should be here for that, not worrying about Victoria Ashford or anyone else who doesn't matter." "But she does matter, doesn't she? She's part of your real life, the life you'll go back to when this year is over." James was quiet for a long moment, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Is that what you think? That this is all just marking time until I can get back to my real life?" "Isn't it?" "I don't know anymore." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. 3 months ago, yes, that's exactly what I thought. But now what? Now I can't imagine going back to the way things were before. Sarah stared at him in the harsh fluorescent light of the parking garage, her heart beating so loud she was sure he could hear it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being pretend for me." He reached out and touched her cheek gently, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "I'm saying that watching you cry in that hospital room made me want to fix everything that was hurting you. I'm saying that the thought of Victoria or anyone else trying to come between us made me want to claim you in front of the whole world. James, I'm saying I think I'm falling in love with my contract wife, and I have no idea what to do about it." The kiss happened, so naturally that later, Sarah couldn't remember which one of them moved first. His lips were warm and gentle, nothing like the formal peck he'd given her at their wedding. This was real and desperate and full of months of suppressed longing. When they broke apart, Sarah felt dizzy and breathless and more alive than she'd ever felt in her 42 years. "This complicates things," she whispered against his mouth. "Yes, it does." "The contract?" "Forget the contract." He kissed her again, deeper this time. "Forget everything except this." But they couldn't forget. Everything, and they both knew it. Real life intruded the next morning. When Sarah's mother's surgery took longer than expected, and complications arose that had both of them sitting in the waiting room for 8 hours, holding hands and trying not to think about what they'd lose if the worst happened. The surgery was successful, but recovery would be long and uncertain. As Sarah sat by her mother's bedside that evening, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in months, she realized that everything had changed. Not just because of the kiss, but because James had shown her what it felt like to have someone truly care about her well-being. "She looks better," he said softly from the doorway. "She does." Sarah smiled at him and saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Thank you for everything. You don't need to thank me for taking care of my wife's family." The word wife sounded different now, weighted with meaning it hadn't had before. Sarah stood and walked to him, reaching up to straighten his tie in a gesture that felt both natural and intimate. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home, together, and we figure out what this means." "And the contract?" James pulled out his phone and scrolled to an email. "I had my lawyer draw up an amendment. The 12-month requirement is null and void. You're free to leave anytime you want, with full compensation regardless of how long you stay." Sarah stared at him in surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want you to stay because you want to be here, not because you're contractually obligated." He cupped her face in his hands. "I want you to choose me, Sarah. Not my money, not the security I can provide, me." Standing in that hospital room with her mother breathing peacefully behind her, and the man she'd grown to love looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, Sarah Mitchell Davidson made the easiest choice of her life. "I choose you," she whispered. "Contract or no contract, money or no money, I choose you." 6 months later, they renewed their vows in the renovated Mitchell Memorial Library, surrounded by the entire town and Sarah's mother, who was healthy enough to walk her daughter down the aisle. This time, the kiss was real, witnessed by everyone who mattered, sealing a promise that had nothing to do with business arrangements and everything to do with love. As James spun her around the dance floor they'd set up among the book stacks, Sarah marveled at how sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. She'd married a stranger for money and found a soulmate instead. And as he whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Davidson," against her ear, Sarah knew that some contracts were written not on paper, but in the heart,